Okay, so our first question for the afternoon is, how would you say that all of the research in science and physics is affecting the actual practice of medicine or the science of medicine?
It's a very good question. It's an interesting thing about this everything that underlies this whole conference. I remember many years ago this question of where does the physics of today, the science of today, where and how do they affect medicine? And how can I say this? Always in my mind is what I was speaking about earlier. What is true healing? So I think for many, many practitioners, again, we're speaking of osteopathic medicine here, which is what I can speak to. I think it's true in naturopathic medicine as well, probably other areas. Of course, science underlies it all. Unfortunately, this very wonderful talk that we were just watching, I've seen him speak before. It's a beautiful example of it. We've learned so much by studying this field of epigenetics that has changed how we treat people and recommendations that we make, both from a purely medical point of view and from a holistic point of view, as Dr. Aditya was speaking, that we can really understand that eating too much chicken might give somebody sinusitis, or how other foods affect the body. Now we're learning so much about biogenomes and abdominal bacteria, intestinal bacteria, really. Anyway, it just goes on and on. So everything that's happening in science is affecting medicine, and in a more peripheral way, I would say, what the physicists are discovering has been monumental in impacting the way that physicians and other people think about medicine, because, of course, the physicists are now saying everything's energy. It may be that the great saints have been saying that for thousands of years, but the scientists were not saying it. And we know how that is. Davy mentioned this morning Galileo's being considered, what's the word that she used? A heretic, I think, because he was saying man is not the center of the universe, and the Catholic Church just didn't know what to do with that. Well, having these very well-respected physicists come in and say everything is energy, so that it resets how we look at things. It's dramatically changed fields. I can speak directly to cardiology, but other fields as well. What is interesting for me still, if I take off my medical hat and I put on my spiritual life hat, my meditator hat, is that no matter how far science goes, no matter how close they come to describing many things or proving things, that these great avatars from thousands of years ago until right now have been telling us over and over, because truth is eternal. Ultimately, it's going to get to that place where science will not be able to discover truth, because as long as there's an observer, as long as the mind is involved, then we're in our mind. And then it creates this place where the great saints can tell us, meditate, go beyond mind, and that is where you will find ultimate, real health and wellness. The scientists will not be able to prove it. I'll just take a moment with this, not a moment, but a couple of minutes with this question to share a story. which I've shared many times over the years, of a documentary that was made by a man whose name is Herzog, I forget his first name again, on the Antarctic. And it's stunning. It's called Encounters at the Edge of the World, and it is just physically beautiful. There's a lot about it. But near the end of the documentary, he's interviewing one of the scientists. These are the great scientists of the world in their fields who are supported to go up there. It's very expensive, as you might imagine, and carry on their research. And Hertz, I wish I could remember his first name, but anyway, he kept asking the scientist, well, how could you explain this? How can you say more to us about it? And the scientist was losing his words. He couldn't express himself. One of the great scientists of our time, and if you look at the documentary, you'll see what I mean. And finally he said, I don't know how to say it. I think this is what they call God. He was saying there's something happening here that is beyond any language that we have, that's beyond mind. I see it. I can see it. So I can attest to it. I'm having the experience of it, but I can't describe it in any scientific terms. So of course, science has a huge impact on medicine. But ultimately, neither of them will be able to take us to that place of true healing, which, as I was saying in my talk, requires a shift in consciousness.
In your experience as a practicing physician for the past 4 decades, do you see any significant shifts in how Western medicine, both in its practice and in academia, look at health and healing? If so, what are they?
Well, I mean, there have been so many shifts in the, you're right, whoever asked that question, but of course that would be obvious. In the decades that I've practiced medicine, many of them scientific discoveries, discoveries of, Dr. Aditya was talking about somebody taking 8 pills for hypertension. I hope they were 8 different medicines and not 8 of the same medicine, but we've just gotten so good at how we treat so many things, and lives are saved now. That I know my own father died when he was, had just turned 39. I was 16, just turned 14 myself, and he was 39. And I was very close with him. And many times over the years, I thought, wow, he missed it by not much as time goes, that he would have never died if that had happened even 10 years later, never mind for sure, 20 years later, his cardiac event that he had. So there's been huge shifts in the scientific, purely medical way in every field. And I think they're trying, Western medicine is trying very hard to take a look at some of what has been presented to them for many, many years about practices of deep relaxation. I mean, it took forever to convince people in medicine that diet actually mattered, that exercise mattered, that deep relaxation mattered. Never mind deep meditation now, even though we are finally collecting very impressive data in many, many fields that says if you can meditate even 8, never mind 15 minutes, if you can do it twice a day, we can go through almost every subspecialty, every area of the body, from various cancers to insomnia to psychiatric diseases to hypertension to cardiac rehab. I could just keep going. There are very convincing data now that say meditation's a good thing. As you can see from Dr. Aditya's talk, he got this man walking. He said, can you walk a little bit? The man's walking 45 minutes twice a day. That's not just a little bit, but these holistic approaches are phenomenal and life-changing, and medicine's trying. And then Dr. Aditya didn't even really mention or get into meditation, which is it will be a major game changer. Unfortunately, so far, let me say up until about 5 to 10 years ago, because I dropped out of medicine, I quit reading all of the studies. I read the titles of the studies and maybe a little bit of the abstract. So this is probably still true, is that they take all of these advances in holistic health and spirituality, and they try and make them work through a medical model, and it loses a lot. So I don't want to be critical of Western medicine. That's why I keep saying they're really trying hard, but it's so deep about where the money comes from for research, who's supporting a lot of Western medicine, what it would mean to prove that drugs aren't necessary in many places. We would love to think that everybody's ethics were beyond all of this, but we know better, and we also know that our minds fool us. So they say, oh, that can't work, we're not going to study it. Or what drug company is going to support studies that might get rid of their drugs? And a lot of medical research comes through the drug companies, and of course other places. The government supports a lot of it, but all by way of saying, we're at a complicated juncture. And remember, I said we were moving up towards the light. We are. I think we need to get a little closer before we'll see the next degree of change.
I resent the disease I am struggling with. I wish it would go away. How am I supposed to have a good attitude about something that causes me such discomfort?
That's a very good and a very challenging question to answer, because it's, you can never solve a problem on the level that it was created. And I was just, after Davy's talk this morning, I looked up Einstein's quotes. I've heard, of course, many of them, and they're fabulous. But he says it, if ever you Google his quotes, he actually says something about how you can't make changes on different levels of consciousness like that. But even if we just look at the level at which the problem was created, so here we are with a disease, maybe it's chronic pain, maybe it's debilitating in any number of other ways, and yet we want to be, as that patient of mine was, not just accepting. She wasn't just accepting, she took that energy and transformed her consciousness, and it gave her life. It was the best, it was so far beyond what she imagined with her mind that it was going to be. She became a true light in the world. We want that to happen, but the mind is very good at what it's supposed to do, which is to keep showing us a lot of what's wrong, and it does that very well. So we have to find a bypass. We have to get around the mind. We have to fool it, and that's not always easy to do. Definitely, meditation is the way, but sitting to meditate when you're agitated is not easy. So we start with things like physical exercise. We start with things like keeping good company, bringing ourselves into an environment where other people are around us who are solution-oriented, not problem-oriented. We can't just deny and kind of try and stuff the problem away. That will not work. We have to transform the energy. But again, it's hard. Spending time in the company of positively thinking, solution-oriented people is good. Exercise is good. Exercise while listening to spiritually elevating music, which typically means music that's inspired, that came to someone, that was not thought through their minds. Chanting, any of a number of chants, is a very good way to do it. Until we can get ourselves to the place to sit and meditate, we cannot do what you're asking about until we begin to loosen a lot of that energy that is stuck, literally stuck in those, I would say for this question, negative places. But we all come in as human beings with energy stuck in what are called vrittis. And as we do some of these spiritual practices, little by little, energy is released and it rises and it goes through the rest of the chakras in free, the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. So flowing much more easily into the heart, where we can then, where energy is transformed, no further material signs of the energy, but in a devotional way, offer it up to the point between the eyebrows. So when all of those voices come that say, I hate this, why me? Who could live with this? You're only saying there's a way out because you don't have it. And that's the ego. That's actually Satan getting a hold of us. So we have to start with baby steps. Maybe quit trying even to let go of that attitude or that negativity. Stop that process and rather just move into something positive. You know, one of the things that I didn't say in my talk this morning that I had actually wanted to say, but wasn't time then, it's time now, is that transformational medicine is interesting in that it's not there to show us who we need to become. Transformational medicine means letting go of who we are not. And that is really more profound than it might sound at first. It's what Patanjali is telling us with the yamas. That's why it always feels upside down and backwards when we first read the yamas. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. But it's profound what he's saying. He's saying, if you can quit doing that, your true nature will be revealed. Whichever of those 5 yamas, excuse me, if you can quit being violent in the physical plane or even your thoughts, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you quit being greedy, he just walks us through and he says, don't do those things, and your true nature will be revealed. And in a way, that's what we have to look at here. We have to say, that's not who you really are, neither the difficult time with it nor the condition. So slowly, just move through moments where you can just try and let it be over here, not repress it, and move more towards your true soul nature. Because then through those means that I was saying, the chanting, the exercise, the good company, beginning meditation, because when you do this, the pain may not change at all, as was the case with that patient that I spoke about before who was so brutally beaten and damaged by Castro's people. She was in pain. She was in severe chronic pain. But in a certain way, she learned to pay it no mind. And then it's like it was outside of the essence of who she was. She could observe it from time to time, but it didn't have the best of her. So that's a long answer, but to a very, very good question, actually.
How do we know the difference between fear and caution when it comes to caring for our bodies and avoiding disease? Especially during a pandemic like this, it has been tricky for me to know whether I am being afraid and becoming paranoid or being cautious.
Now, that also is a very good question. And I would even do away, let's see, there's something about the word cautious that feels contractive to me. And it's important because you're asking this question, how can I make sure that I'm not moving from something that's downward pulling, contractive, ego-centered, and approach life, and with the pandemic added into all of life, with a thoughtful, mindful, I would use those words, if that's okay, rather than cautious. And I would say, how do we shift from being fearful to being thoughtful and mindful? Because of course we needed to be. We just all came through a life-threatening situation. And it's not the only times in life that we'll be faced with a life-threatening situation. And it's a very challenging question that you ask, because fear and the anxiety that almost always come with it, they are very powerful emotions. They have a way of not just getting us, but I say this because I've worked with so many people over the years with anxiety, and that anxiety and that fear colors everything. So even somebody who has significant high blood pressure, and you say, I want to start a medicine on you, they're too afraid. And so everything becomes a battle because we get stuck trying to control life. This is what fear and anxiety do to us. We're going to control every aspect of life, and then maybe everything will be okay. And of course, just by virtue of the fact that you're asking the question, you already know that's a fallacy. That's a major delusion. We cannot control every aspect of life. We really are not in that way in control of any aspect of life. We're not. We have karma, things are going to come, stuff's gonna happen. Everything that comes to us, every crisis, every difficult experience, every great experience as well, it's a perfect opportunity for transformation. So this is where we have to begin to change our mind. That's what I was saying before. And begin to tell ourselves over and over, and in the same way, put ourselves near uplifted, positive, hearts wide open kind of people who do not live with a lot of fear, but who may be mindful and thoughtful, but they're not afraid, because as Yogananda said, what comes of itself, let it come. There are certain situations in life we are not going to be able to avoid. We cannot change the situation. What we have complete control over is how we react to it. So if you're wondering if it's fear, it may well be. It very well may be. Because I know when the pandemic happened, And I was trying to put out the word to a lot of people who wanted it from me because of my, but probably both my medical and spiritual background. I kept assuring people, and it was true, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Whatever happened would happen. But I will be very thoughtful about this. And that meant closing our temple earlier than was mandated. It meant really encouraging people to wear masks before they were mandated. It meant saying to people, stay away from each other, stopping classes. Believe me, I would not have won a popularity contest right then. But that was being thoughtful and mindful. And it was the right thing to do. And when something's the right thing to do, we don't feel contracted, anxious. You can pretty much tell when you're fearful. It doesn't feel good. When you're thoughtful, it feels perfect. It just feels like, absolutely, this is what I'm going to do. There are many instances in life like that. You know, the people who first started saying no to getting on that particular jet that was crashing, that was wisdom. That wasn't, you didn't have to be afraid. If there's something inherently wrong with a series of jets, why would we get on it? We could come up with a million examples. But that doesn't feel bad. Doesn't feel like this. It feels like it's easy to take a deep breath around it. And then, if you still wonder, honestly, seek spiritual counsel. Go and talk to somebody. Because often, we can't get out of our own minds, and we do not see clearly when the mind, meaning in this case, emotions, are involved. We can't. Yogananda said it, Swami Kriyananda said it. Intuition cannot come to us when we're emotional. So that's a good time to go and talk with somebody. I hope that answers your question.
We'll end with one final question today, which I think will summarize all of what's been shared in our afternoon session. Speaking to today's topic of the crossroads of ancient wisdom and emerging science, what would the great saints and sages offer to us as the most important tool for fostering lasting health and wellness?
I feel like all of a sudden I'm being asked to speak for the great saints. That's a little scary. Can I just speak from Shanti? It feels better. But I really feel that, you know, I've often teased that every once in a while I want to get up when I'm giving a sermon and just say, meditate, meditate, meditate. Take meditation classes, become a Kriyaban if you're not, and then sit down, because it's the answer to everything. I mean, Sri Yukteswar used to answer, or was it Lahiri? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused, but 2 avatars. One of them used to say whenever anybody came to him with a question, it didn't matter what it was, about their children, about their work, about their marriage, about anything, practice more Kriya. Now, having said that, if you're not there and that's difficult, all of what Dr. Aditya was talking about, of course, he ended with Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings, but all of the rest of it, good diet matters because food is energy. So you want to eat clean food, healthy food. You don't want to eat too much food. You want to eat when you're hungry and sleep when you're tired. You want to exercise. You want to keep good company. All of those things will begin to change the vibration of who you are and will lead you to a practice of meditation that will ultimately not just solve the problem, but if we speak at this coming together, what this coming together really means is that science is catching up with the great saints. In a way, it's what it really means, and we're here to celebrate that. But yeah, all of these healthful, beneficial, changing our lives at a vibrational and consciousness level is what we're asking.